Sloane Barlow lived alone on the fourth floor of a gray building called Eastview Apartments. The neighborhood was unremarkable, and the residents kept to themselves. Sloane worked as an editorial assistant at a small publishing house downtown. She was 32 years old, and her life followed a quiet, predictable rhythm. She woke up at 7, made coffee, walked to the bus stop, returned by 6, ate dinner alone, and read until sleep. No one knew her well enough to miss her quickly. On a Tuesday morning in November, the building's superintendent found her door slightly ajar. That was unusual because Sloane always locked everything twice. Victor Price was the superintendent. He had worked at Eastview for 19 years. He carried a ring of master keys, and he had a habit of checking each floor before noon. He knocked on Sloane's door and received no answer. He knocked again, and then he pushed. The door opened without resistance. Sloane was on the floor of her living room, near the small wooden table where she kept her laptop and her phone. She was not moving. Victor called emergency services with a trembling voice, but it was already too late. The paramedics arrived and confirmed that Sloane had been dead for approximately 10 hours. The cause appeared to be a single wound to the chest, but there was no weapon in the room. The police came, took photographs, dusted for fingerprints, and asked Victor a few questions. Victor told them that he had seen no one suspicious, that the building had no cameras, and that the front door lock was old and sometimes loose. The investigators noted that the apartment door had been locked from the inside when Victor arrived, but he had opened it with his master key. That detail was confusing because the door had not been forced. The police concluded that Sloane had probably let in someone she trusted. That person had hurt her and then left, but the door had been locked from inside afterward. How that happened was unclear. Without witnesses and without a clear suspect, the case was marked as inactive after 3 weeks. Jordan Lee was a local reporter who wrote for a small online publication called the Metro Standard. Jordan was 28 years old and had a reputation for being patient and thorough. Jordan did not like unfinished puzzles. Most reporters moved on to the next crime, but Jordan kept a folder labeled Barlow. The police had released a short statement saying that the investigation was ongoing, but Jordan knew that meant nothing was being done. Jordan requested a copy of the initial report and read it 7 times. One sentence stood out. It said that Sloane's phone was found on the floor near her right hand with a battery level of 32%. The report also mentioned a recent call log, but no further details were provided. Jordan went to the courthouse and requested the full phone records. It took 4 days and a small fee. When the document arrived, Jordan saw something strange. Sloane had made a call at 11:48 p.m. on the night of her death. The call lasted 0 seconds because it was not answered. The number dialed was Sloane's own phone number. That meant Sloane had called herself 12 minutes before the estimated time of death. The police had noted this but dismissed it as a misdial or a glitch. Jordan did not think it was a glitch. Jordan returned to Eastview Apartments on a gray Friday afternoon. The building was quiet, and the elevator smelled of old carpet and cleaning fluid. Jordan started on the 4th floor and knocked on every door. Most residents were not home. But one door opened. Danny, who lived in apartment 4B, directly next to Sloane's unit 4C. Danny was 35 years old and worked from home as a translator. He wore glasses and a plain sweater. He spoke softly, and his eyes moved slowly. Jordan introduced himself and asked if Danny had heard anything on the night Sloane died. Danny said no. He had been working late on a translation project and had fallen asleep at his desk around midnight. He said he was a heavy sleeper and that the walls were thick. Jordan thanked him and moved on. Apartment 4A was empty. Apartment 4D was occupied by an elderly woman who did not answer. Jordan went down to the ground floor and found Victor Price in his small office near the laundry room. Victor was sorting old keys into a wooden box. Jordan asked Victor about the locked door. Victor explained that he had used his master key to enter, that the door had been locked from inside, and that he had not touched anything except the doorknob. Victor said he had known Sloane for 2 years, that she always paid rent on time, and that she never had visitors. Jordan asked if anyone else had a key. Victor said no, he was the only superintendent, and the landlord lived in another city. Jordan asked Victor where he was on the night of the death. Victor said he was home. He lived in a small apartment on the first floor, went to bed at 10, and woke at 6. He had no alibi because he lived alone. Jordan wrote everything down and left. The next day, Jordan returned to talk to the elderly woman in 4D. Her name was Irene. She was 78 and used a cane. Irene said she had heard nothing unusual, but she added something unexpected. She said that Sloane had a visitor sometimes, a man. She had seen him twice in the hallway. Irene described him as tall, with dark hair and a quiet manner. She did not know his name. Jordan asked when she had last seen him. Irene said about 2 weeks before Sloane died. Jordan wrote that down and then went back to Victor's office. Victor was not there. Jordan waited for 30 minutes and then left a note. The next morning, Jordan received a text from an unknown number. It said, "Meet me at the corner of 5th and Main at 3 p.m. Do not tell anyone." Jordan went. Jordan arrived at 5th and Main at exactly 3 o'clock. The street was busy with afternoon traffic, and a cold wind blew between the buildings. A man in a dark coat approached from the bus stop. It was Danny Wu. Danny looked different outside his apartment. He seemed smaller and more nervous. He asked Jordan not to mention their meeting to anyone. He said that Victor Price had been watching him. Jordan asked what Danny meant. Danny said that 3 days before Sloane died, he had heard a noise in the hallway around 11 at night. He opened his door slightly and saw Victor coming out of Sloane's apartment. Victor was carrying a small plastic bag. Danny said he did not think much of it at the time because Victor had keys to every unit and sometimes did maintenance. But after Sloane died, Danny remembered the bag. He said that Victor had looked at Danny's door as he walked away, and Victor had stopped for a second too long. Danny said he had been afraid to tell the police because he had no proof, and because Victor had worked at Eastview for 19 years. Jordan asked Danny why he was telling this now. Danny said he had seen Jordan's note in Victor's office. He had been passing by and saw it through the window. He copied the number and decided to speak. Jordan thanked Danny and promised to keep the source confidential. Jordan returned to Eastview that evening and sat in a parked car across the street. The building had no cameras, but Jordan had eyes and a notebook. From 6 p.m. to midnight, Jordan watched who entered and left. Victor Price left his ground floor apartment at 7:15 p.m. He walked to a small convenience store 2 blocks away, bought a sandwich and a newspaper, and returned at 7:40 p.m. No one else came or went. Jordan returned the next night and saw nothing unusual. On the third night, Jordan saw something. At 9:22 p.m., a tall man with dark hair walked toward the building. He was not a resident. Jordan had memorized all the faces from the mailboxes in the lobby. The man pressed a buzzer. No one answered. He waited 2 minutes and pressed again. Then Victor Price came out of his ground floor apartment and opened the front door. The man walked inside. Jordan could not follow without being seen, so Jordan waited. 45 minutes later, the man left. Victor did not come out again. Jordan wrote down a description: tall, dark hair, black jacket, jeans, and a slight limp on the left side. The next morning, Jordan went to Victor's office. Victor was drinking coffee and reading a newspaper. Jordan asked about the tall man. Victor's face did not change, but his hand stopped moving. Victor said that was his nephew. He visited sometimes. His name was Mark. Jordan asked for Mark's last name and phone number. Victor said he did not have to give that information, and he asked Jordan to leave. Jordan left but returned an hour later with a request. Jordan wanted to see the maintenance logs for Sloane's apartment. Victor hesitated and then pulled out a large binder. The log showed that Victor had entered Sloane's apartment 3 times in the past 6 months, once to fix a leaky faucet, once to replace a light bulb, and once for a routine smoke detector check. All entries were dated and signed by Sloane. The last entry was 2 weeks before her death. Jordan asked Victor if he had been in Sloane's apartment on the night she died. Victor said no, he had been in his own apartment, asleep. Jordan reminded Victor that Danny Wu had seen him leaving Sloane's unit 3 days before her death. Victor paused. Then he said that Danny was lying, that Danny had always been a strange tenant who complained about noise that did not exist. Jordan thanked Victor and left. But Jordan did not believe Victor, and Jordan did not fully believe Danny either. The problem was that both men had reasons to lie. Victor had a master key and a history of entering apartments without clear reason. Danny had a direct view of Victor's movements and waited until a reporter showed up to share information. Jordan needed more. Jordan went to the police station and asked to see the original crime scene photos. An officer named Hayes agreed to show them because the case was inactive and Jordan was a known journalist. The photos showed Sloane's living room from every angle. In one photo, a small scratch was visible on the wooden floor near the door. In another photo, the window in the bedroom was slightly open. The police report had mentioned that the bedroom window faced a fire escape. Jordan asked if the window had been tested for fingerprints. Officer Hayes said yes, but only Sloane's prints were found on the inside frame. The outside frame had none, which was strange because the window was old and should have collected dust and smudges. Someone had wiped it clean. Jordan asked about the fire escape. Officer Hayes said it connected to the roof and also to the ground floor alley. Anyone could have climbed up or down without being seen. Jordan returned to Eastview and climbed the fire escape from the alley. It was rusted but sturdy. Jordan reached the 4th floor and looked into Sloane's bedroom window. The window was now closed and locked. But from the outside, Jordan could see that the lock was a simple latch. It could be opened with a thin tool from the outside if the window was not fully sealed. Jordan made a mental note. That night, Jordan wrote a long article that did not name Victor or Danny directly but described the inconsistencies in the case. The article was published online and got a modest number of views. 2 days later, Jordan received an email from an address that did not exist anymore. The email had no subject line and no signature. It said, "Ask Victor about the bag." Jordan printed the email and stared at it. The bag. Danny had mentioned a plastic bag. Victor had been carrying a plastic bag out of Sloane's apartment 3 days before she died. Jordan went back to Danny's apartment and knocked. Danny opened the door and looked tired. Jordan asked if Danny remembered anything else about the bag. Danny closed his eyes and thought. Then he said the bag was white, semi-transparent, and it had something dark inside. He could not tell what it was. Jordan asked Danny why he had not mentioned the bag to the police. Danny said he was afraid. and that he did not think a plastic bag mattered. But now he was not so sure. Jordan thanked Danny and walked to Victor's office. Victor was not there. His door was locked, but a light was on inside. Jordan looked through the small window on the door and saw Victor's desk, the wooden box of keys, and a white plastic bag tucked between the filing cabinet and the wall. Jordan took a photo through the window and left. Jordan waited until the next morning and returned to Eastview with a clear plan. Instead of confronting Victor directly, Jordan called Officer Hayes at the police station and explained the new information: the white bag, Danny's statement, the fire escape, and the wiped window frame. Officer Hayes was skeptical but agreed to come to Eastview for a conversation. Hayes arrived at 10 a.m. and met Jordan in the lobby. Together they walked to Victor's office. Victor was inside sorting through a drawer. He looked up, and his expression changed when he saw the uniform. Hayes asked Victor if he would answer a few additional questions. Victor said yes and closed the drawer. Hayes asked Victor about the night of Sloane's death. Victor repeated that he was asleep. Hayes asked Victor about the white bag that Danny Wu had seen. Victor paused for 3 seconds. Then he said the bag contained trash. He had taken out Sloane's trash because she had asked him to. Jordan asked why Sloane would ask him to take her trash at 11 at night. Victor said she had mentioned it earlier that day. Hayes asked Victor if he had ever entered Sloane's apartment without permission. Victor said no. Hayes asked Victor about the tall man with the limp. Victor said that was his nephew Mark. He came to visit sometimes. Hayes asked for Mark's phone number. Victor wrote it down. Hayes stepped outside to make a call. Jordan stayed in the office with Victor. Neither spoke. After 5 minutes, Hayes returned and said that the phone number did not work. Victor said that Mark changed numbers often. Hayes then asked Victor to open the filing cabinet. Victor hesitated, then he opened it. Inside were maintenance records, old lease agreements, and a white plastic bag. Hayes pulled out the bag and looked inside. There was a dark sweater with a small stain on the sleeve. Victor said it was his sweater. The stain was coffee. Hayes asked why the sweater was in a plastic bag inside a filing cabinet. Victor said he had no good answer. Hayes then asked Victor to come to the station for a formal interview. Victor agreed quietly. At the station, Hayes and another officer questioned Victor for 3 hours. Victor did not confess, but he made mistakes. He said he had not been in Sloane's apartment after 8 p.m. on any night. But Danny Wu had seen him at 11 p.m. Victor then said that Danny must have mistaken the date. But Danny was certain because he had checked his calendar and remembered that he had finished a large translation project that night. Victor then said that Sloane had called him about a noise in her wall, that he had gone to check it, and that he had found nothing. Hayes asked why that was not in the maintenance log. Victor said he forgot to log it. Hayes asked about the bag. Victor said it was his sweater. He had spilled coffee on it and put it in the bag to take home for washing. Hayes asked why the bag was still in his office 3 weeks later. Victor said he forgot. Hayes asked about the open bedroom window. Victor said he did not know anything about it. Hayes asked about the wiped frame. Victor said nothing. Meanwhile, Jordan was back at Eastview talking to the elderly woman Irene again. Irene remembered something new. She said that on the night Sloane died, she had woken up at midnight to use the bathroom. She looked out her window and saw a light in the alley below. Someone was standing near the fire escape. She could not see the face, but the person was wearing a dark jacket and had a slight limp. Jordan's heart beat faster. Jordan asked Irene if she had told anyone this before. Irene said she told the police, but they did not seem interested. Jordan went back to the station and told Hayes. Hayes now had a witness placing someone matching Mark's description near the fire escape on the night of the death. Hayes tracked down Mark through DMV records. There was only one Mark with that description and that limp in the city. Mark was Victor's nephew. He was brought in for questioning. Mark broke after 40 minutes. He said that Victor had asked him to climb the fire escape and open Sloane's bedroom window from the outside on the night she died. Victor had given him a thin metal tool to lift the latch. Mark was supposed to enter and remove something from Sloane's apartment, but when he opened the window, he saw Sloane on the floor and panicked. He climbed down and ran. He did not call anyone. He did not touch anything except the window frame, which he wiped with his sleeve. Mark said Victor had told him it was just a burglary, that Sloane would be out of town. Mark did not know Victor had hurt her. But Victor had hurt her, and Victor had locked the door from the inside using a simple trick. He had tied a thin piece of string to the inside latch, closed the door, pulled the string to turn the latch, and then slid the string out through the gap under the door. That was why the door was locked from inside with no one inside. Victor had learned the trick years ago from an old maintenance manual. Victor confessed that night. He said Sloane had seen him in her apartment 3 days earlier when she came home early. He was not taking out trash, he was looking for cash she kept in a drawer. She caught him and said she would report him to the landlord. He panicked and planned the rest. The sweater in the bag had a small blood stain from when he tried to clean the floor. The coffee story was a lie. Victor Price was arrested for murder. Danny Wu was cleared. Mark was charged as an accessory. Jordan Lee wrote the final article 2 weeks later. It was shared thousands of times. The case was closed. Sloane Barlow was buried on a cold December morning. Only 12 people attended. But Jordan was there, and so was Irene from 4D. After the funeral, Jordan walked back to Eastview Apartments and stood in the empty lobby. The building was quiet again. Jordan thought about the phone call Sloane had made to herself 12 minutes before she died. No one ever explained that. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was a glitch. Or maybe, in her last moments, Sloane had tried to call the one person who could save her, herself. Because no one else was coming. Jordan left the building and never returned. The case was solved. But some questions do not need answers.